You're watching The Roach on Florida TV.
Why don't we check out this package? And let me just set this up. This is a story we did on Kathleen. This is maybe, I don't know, maybe around 2000. Is that right?
Yeah.
1999, 2000.
I'm sure we look the same.
Oh, identical. Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. Well, you look the same.
No.
And we were doing a story on you as you were still a still photographer, and you decided that you'd go to Big Cat Rescue, which was Easy Street back then. I want to be clear about this so this makes sense. And then we'll explain it afterwards, what we were doing there and the story. But I think the story sort of explains itself. And I was working for news for a television station in Orlando, Florida at the time, doing a story on you. For you folks listening on Apple Podcasts, some of the streaming services, Spotify, of course, if you want to see the actual video, you'll need to go to YouTube so you can watch this story. Otherwise, you can listen. So let's check out Big Cat Rescue back in 2000, home of Carole Baskin.
Kathleen Overchuck has always dreamed of photographing wild animals. But growing up in Orlando has not exactly given her the chance to go one-on-one with many lions and tigers.
Oh.
That is until she discovered wildlife on Easy Street. Hidden not far from the skyscrapers of downtown Tampa sits a most unusual animal sanctuary. A 40-acre home for exotic cats. But you don't just watch them through tall steel fencing. Instead, to see, you go inside their cages.
It's wonderful to be able to go right in the cage, and you're right there. They're right there. You can't get that close out in the wild.
Okay, he's got it.
Okay.
At Easy Street, not only do you go inside the cat cages,
When you guys feed the tiger, I need you to hold the chicken like this so it's stiff and goes right in. You pick a square right in front of his mouth, and he'll take it from you just like that.
just like that, guests line up to help feed the kings of the jungle. Our micro camera captures this hand-raising experience. But tiger feeding is only the beginning. Guests can spend a night in a rustic cabin. Big deal, you say? It is when you consider the cabin is inside an exotic cat's cage. Guests can wake up petting a wild serval.
Oh, what a good girl.
Carole Lewis is the creator of Easy Street. Since the early 90s, this property has slowly become an orphanage for 150 unwanted exotic cats.
These guys were at a fur farm, so they would have ended up being coats, as were the first 56 cats that we brought here. They were all scheduled to be slaughtered.
But it's not just the opportunity to go one-on-one with wild animals during the day. Here at Easy Street, the other thrill is what happens when the sun goes down. In pitch darkness, visitors take a guided tour of the cat habitats. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity allows guests to see felines in their nighttime environment. For Carole Lewis, these unusual visitor encounters are the sanctuary's monetary survival, and she believes the animal bonding pays off in many ways.
It's only after they've created that bond that they're going to be willing to do things like save habitat or to really get out there and do something to preserve these animals in the wild.
And while it may not be the wild plains of Africa, for this photographer, Easy Street is an animal encounter she will never forget. Randy Roush, Fox 35 News at 10.
You were just pointing out during that, so everyone's clear, she was Carole Lewis at that time, married to Don Lewis, which we'll talk about in a moment. And there's so much happening in that story when you look back. And for people that have never been to like a rescue or something, back then, I don't know how much has changed since we've been there, but they would always allow you to do a lot of things. And they wanted to show that. And it may seem strange now looking back at it, but if you saw the package there, like one of the things you got to do there, and I still can't believe you got to do this. And even if Carole was watching this, I know they've gotten rid of this. Yeah. But what they did is they took a habitat. It was a pretty big caged-in area, if you remember, and it's what they just saw. They built like a cabin inside the cage. And then outside of the cabin, but still caged up, was a wild serval, which is sort of a big, I don't know, what would you describe as a beautiful animal?
Yeah.
What would you describe it as?
It wasn't a big cat like a lion or tiger, but it was a a big cat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would get to spend the night, and this was, by the way, I know it sounds wacko now, but at the time, what they're trying to do is just raise money any way they can to keep Big Cat Rescue, going because they got to raise money somehow to pay for all the food and the property taxes and blah blah blah.
Well, as you saw in Tiger King, it cost a lot of money to support these animals.
Yeah,
and,
weren't they saying in something like $60,000 a month or something like that just in
I
food?
think it was $10,000 per big cat. So per
Yeah.
lion or tiger, it was like $10,000 was one guy's quote, and then the Tiger King said it was about $3,000.
Okay.
So per cat, but you have a lot of cats. That can add up fast.
Yeah. So then, at that time, you could spend the night. They remember we even thought, can you let the serval in the room? Remember when we first got there, we were like, can you let? And she's like, no.
Yeah. But I think they used to do that actually even before we went there. I think they would let the cats in the cabin all night long, and people weren't getting sleep, and the cats were wrecking clothes and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember that story before we went.
Yeah, it was probably not the best idea to let a large cat sleep with
Wild animal.
with wild. That could have really gone bad when you think about it, you
Yeah.
know. But you could go stand outside again the cabin, but you're still in a cage. And I don't know. I think we were throwing the ball to the serval or some sort of thing,
Yeah.
and you got to play with it, which was kind of cool at the time. In the cabin, I don't know if we showed much of it, but it was pretty basic inside. It had water, it had a refrigerator, and
Yeah. Well, you weren't really there for the cabin. You were there
Yeah.
for the experience. With
Right,
the,
right,
with the
right.
animals.
So that was a cool experience. And also, I think in there you had like a night walk that you could do at the rescue, which we did, and you'd go see the lions and the tigers at night. Remember that?
Yeah.
You could go see what they're doing because they're usually a little bit more active at night, a little bit more curious at night. And I remember that being kind of cool. And then the other thing you could do you remember you could hand feed? This is hard to believe, but they would have guests being able to hand feed. In fact, we might be able to see some video as we're talking. You could actually take like these tongs and hand them to a tiger,
Through the
the
fence,
cage. Yeah, you weren't in the cage. Thank God for that. But that was kind of cool and kind of a neat experience. Did you? And then you were getting shots, obviously, a lot of photography shots,
Yes.
still shots.
Yes. Well, there's one thing interesting about us over the years is we love animals, and we've gotten to do a lot of cool things with animals, both in captivity and out in the wild. And yes, and so this is just another one of the cool things that that's out there to do.
Yeah. Well, and I remember I think I was also working at a TV station in Tampa there for a while, and I remember going to Big Cat Rescue 1, 2, 3, I don't know if it was like 4 or 5 times. They were very welcoming. They were very nice to the media. I will tell you, there was nothing odd or weird there. The cages were. I saw in Tiger King they were, I don't know, Joe Exotic was talking that they, housed them, not good or in small cages. I never saw that at all. I only saw big habitats and, nice places for these cats to roam. Did you see anything otherwise?
Well, if I remember correctly, which it has been some time, so my memory could be off a little bit, but I remember that they would come into a little cage to eat, so they
Right.
could safely put the food there. They'd have the animals come in, and then they'd go back into their big habitats. So I think that's what he was talking about, was the little place that they'd go to eat. But then I do remember a nice big habitat for them to roam around and run and play in. I also remember them splashing in the water and having
Right.
fun in the water. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, and I'm pretty sure Carole feels the same way too. It's just sad that they can't be released back out into the wild. These were lions and tigers that people did not want anymore, and so Carole took them in. But it's sad because they still have to be in an enclosed habitat there.
Habitat, yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, cage, whatever. Habitat, fancy word for caged-in animal.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So, but you do wish that they could be released.
Yeah.
Back out in the wild, and they just can't, I guess.
Yeah.
No more roach on Florida TV.